Okay, hi everybody. My name is Matthew Fortner. I'm the visuals editor at the Post and Courier, and today we're going to discuss long form visual storytelling. I first joined the Post and Courier back in 1997, and I was here until 2002, and I returned in 2014, where I've had the privilege of leading a very talented visuals team. Um, Today, we've got Andrew Whittaker and Gavin Mcintyre, and I'll let them tell you a little bit about themselves. So before we dive into the discussion, so who wants to start? We'll just go, Andy, how about you?
Yeah. Okay. My name is Andy Whittaker. I've been a staff photographer here for about 4.5 years now. Grew up in the Midwest and Michigan, moved to Cape Girardeau, Missouri before moving here. And yeah, been here ever since.
Yeah, my name is, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Gavin.
My name is Gavin Mcintyre. I've been working here. I'm coming up on 3 years now. I'm originally from Sacramento, California. I moved here at the end of 2017 for a position at the newspaper in Columbia, and then I got a job at the Post and Courier and have been working here ever since.
And we're fortunate to have you both. These guys are very talented photojournalists, and the community is, we're fortunate to have them. So first, I'd like to thank everybody who is watching us live and also watching this later. This will be recorded. So if you have to break away or I want to share it with somebody, that'll be available. And I guess if there's time at the end, I know some of you sent some questions. If we don't address those on the way, during this, we'll address those questions. So you can submit those questions clicking the Q&A button. While we're talking, we'll try and keep an eye on those. Maybe we can answer some on the way, but we might also at the end, as I mentioned, get some of those. So, and I'm also reminded that a recording of this event will be emailed to you if you'd like to watch it again. And we encourage you to share that with your friends. And I don't know, should we dive right into it, guys?
Yeah, sounds good.
Work.
All right, let's do it. Andy, you go ahead and start. Well, we have a deck, right? We have some images to show, so this is a little different from the usual Beyond the Headline. So these guys know the format here probably better than I do.
I guess the start about visual storytelling is basically, photojournalists are journalists too, and I think when working on long form stories, it's able, you're able to get like these moments that the average person just doesn't necessarily see. So the story that you're looking at right now, this is Teddy and her son Lakota. I actually met them when barbershops and salons were opening up during the pandemic. And we started talking about, how her son has autism and, they're getting their haircut for the first time. And I made photos of that for just, the idea of hair salons. And I reached back out and I thought it was just very interesting the struggles that she and her son had to go through with in-person therapy. And so I pitched to them, like, would it be all right if I could basically shadow your life for a few months to fully understand visually of what, they're going through. So this first image, this is the first day of school after the pandemic shut down. They're going in person. She's waking up Lakota, for the first day of school. And if we go on to the second image, I think that's an earlier photo. He's wearing his mask. Actually, during the pandemic, they had to do a lot of things that keep, I guess, their whole family occupied. So they rented this inflatable bounce house and this water system, and he's just kind of just out looking, into the world. I really like this photo because it just kind of shows, how straight up he's looking, and just kind of like, like it's kind of the same feeling that we all felt during the pandemic, is like, is it okay to go outside? And I mean, even though it's your backyard, you still, this is early on in the pandemic where we really didn't know that much about this. And we can go on to the second photo. And this one's really is a sweet moment. This is Lakota and his two brothers. This is at a county park, and they're just they're playing sword fight with these sticks, and Lakota felt left out, so he was playing a imaginary sword fight with himself, which I thought that was just a really sweet moment. And then the fourth image, the final one from this project, this is on back to first day of school. Lakota, not just with autism, he's also a child with apraxia, which is a speech disorder. And so a regular mask, so he has a hard time actually articulating words. And so he has to be able to wear a see-through mask to kind of just understand what he's actually talking about. So this is him while in the car riding to school with them.
So Andy, typically we, I guess our daily work for people who don't know exactly how we operate, we often have stories that come up where they're on a much more compressed schedule. We work with the reporter or editor, and we kind of have a very specific kind of mission visually in a very compressed time frame. Now, so this is obviously a very different story, and it was over a period of time. So one thing, it's one thing to encounter these photographs as you're out and about, or even call someone up, or meet someone for the first time. But can you talk a little bit on how maybe that relationship because we saw a photo of, kind of an intimate photo of him at home, and that's not the usual sort of access.
So yeah, so I guess the difference between long form storytelling and daily stuff, when you meet someone for the first time, it's not like you're going to be able to like get into their bedroom the first time you meet them. It's, I think you're able, while working on a story, over a period of like several months, you build this relationship with the people you photograph, and the comfort level becomes to a point where they actually don't even realize you're there anymore. And I think that's what's very fortunate about these long form stories, is you are able to gain the access that you wouldn't necessarily if it was meeting someone for the first time, having a couple hours with them, and then you're on your way. Where this, you're spending several times, and you kind of talk with them, and you get to understand what the story is about.
Mm-hmm. Did you, looking back over that relationship, can you remember kind of how it was when you first met the family? I mean, how open they were. I mean, to pitch this idea, a lot of people, they're just not going to be up for it. And so it probably does require someone who's willing, but sometimes we run into reluctance. What was this? Was that reluctance there, or were they open?
So yeah, when I first met them, like I said, it was just running into them on a daily assignment, being able to photograph them getting their haircut. And then when I pitched the idea of photographing them, from time to time, I didn't like say, when and how long this would be about. I said I would like to spend some extra days photographing you guys and just kind of understanding what your life is about. The first day I met them, I don't think I even walked into the house with my camera. Kind of just, I wanted to meet the whole family and introduce myself. And then, they were playing outside, and I was like, oh, hey, can I get my camera? And, the first day, I don't think I even went really in the house. I just photographed their backyard, which that one photo from Lakota looking out at his backyard, that was the first day I really started working on him. So it's kind of, you just kind of get a feel and understanding their comfort level along with your own.
Yeah, I know that it's really not, it's not a concept that I think most people are aware of. I mean, their familiarity with photography is a photographer shows up, you stand in a pose, they take a few pictures, and that's done. So this to kind of open up and share their lives with us. I mean, it's something we don't take it for granted. We really appreciate it. So, is there anything you want to cover on this, or do you want to move on to the next?
Yeah, and I guess the transit. So I think a good part of, being a community journalist is, when people will see a story like this, they'll kind of further understand what you're trying to say. And so after I, photographed the McCartys, they reached out of another story idea about this couple dealing with COVID, and I can talk about these images right now. So I met Jenny Lawson right a few months after Lakota story ran. She lives in Berkeley County, Georgia, St. George.
This is Jenny here, just in case.
Yeah,
right?
this is Jenny. And
can you explain what's happening in this image for folks who might not have seen it?
So what's going on in this image is, so the story was about with her and her wife were both unvaccinated, and then her wife Becky went to the ER and was put in in a medically induced coma, and it kind of turned their whole life around and their family's life around, and the idea of actually taking COVID seriously. After about over 50 days in the in a coma, she actually died. This image right here is it was the day that she brought her ashes back home.
Mm-hmm.
Right now she's holding the blanket that she died in with her wife's dog standing right next to her. It was a very intimate, very emotional moment. And honestly, it's kind of difficult. I mean, I think I made a couple of photos, but then you just kind of, you have to give people their space, because it was very emotional for her, and
right.
You have to respect that as a journalist.
That brings up a good point. I think a lot of people, or some people, don't. I think they see us as ambulance chasers and sensitive, and not many, but there are some, and I think that's just a misunderstanding, a mischaracterization, or a stereocast, maybe a stereotype cast, maybe in Hollywood. These moments are, these are difficult for us too. And clearly she was there and aware you were there by invitation. So even so, I mean, we struggle with these moments on doing what's right by the story, and kind of respecting those boundaries. So, and it can be a tricky balance. So that often comes up, not just in long form, but often comes up in daily assignments too.
We can continue to the next image from this. So this is at the hospital. Becky's still, she's in her coma right now. She's just visiting her. And I think one thing that she respected, and of course, when people let into their lives, you have to respect certain wishes, and just to not photograph, her wife, especially at that state. But this was an image that she thought was good to see. She was holding her hand of her wife while she was standing, in the hotel or the hospital room for several hours. We can go into the next photo. This is at Becky's funeral. Becky was known for a lot in the community, not just being in the Pride community, but the radio community, and just owning the horse farm. I mean, they own a farm in St. George. They kind of made together to do rodeos and everything, and they brought the casket around the farm to do one last barrel ride, and it was wonderful to see that respect for her. But this is she was also in the military. This is a military salute for Becky. We go on to the next one. This is same day. This is at the funeral. I just thought I picked this photo. It just shows the variety of different people that came out, and also just the light just hitting just the dust from the horses. I just thought it made for a nice image.
Yeah, it's really nice light with the kind of catching that dust.
And I think like it's just important about while doing these. Like I said, I met Jenny through Teddy McCarty, and it was just, I don't know, I think like they really wanted their stories told, and just the idea of them coming out to me and asking for this was just, I think, a very nice moment. And it just makes it being able to do these things just like such great to actually be able to see someone's life and photograph it, even if they are in some tough times.
All right, so this is the start of a project that Gavin has been working on. It's ongoing. I can't get into too much detail about what's coming up, but it's going to be good. And it's going to be sort of a part two or continuation of a project that Gavin has worked on and we published last summer, might have been May or June. But Gavin, tell us a little bit about this project. Now, this project is actually a little different. I'll just point out first, because this was more of a long researched project, and you guys had some plans and some fun stories on how that got disrupted. But yeah, this is and also an intense project, but kind of came together in a different way, right?
Yeah, and kind of going back to what Andy said, we're photojournalists, so we a lot of our job is also just learning and researching the stories that we work on, and that was part of this story, which was on Omar ibn Said, a Senegalese Muslim scholar who was captured in the Photojournalists region of Senegal, taken to Charleston, where he escaped and then caught and resold in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he'd spend the rest of his life. And so me and reporter Jennifer Berry Hawes essentially retraced his life and tried to find how he got to North Carolina, exactly what were the circumstances of his time in Charleston, and then who was he, and what was his home in Senegal. And so part of that was receiving a grant, luckily, from the Pulitzer Center, allowing us to go to Senegal and basically trying to find out who was this man, Omar ibn Said. And so part of that was, connecting with people who were there who knew more about the country. So we had a pretty large group with us. I think about 7 or 8 in total who traveled with us throughout the country. And so this was a little later in the trip. I'd say we were there for 2 weeks. And this was a village that we stopped at along the Douai River, which splits off from the Senegal River. And we were going to villages and towns, speaking with imams, historians, and just people in the communities, asking if they've heard of Omar, showing them his writings to see if anything connected with them. And this was a moment in the village that I was speaking with the imam, and he mentioned that they were about to have a Quranic school, which is essentially these students sit down on these mats. They have a wooden tablet with ink and then the Quran, and they essentially write out verses. And the thing with Omar, he left us very few details. He wrote an autobiography, but it's not really filled with, exactly what his life was like in Senegal. So it was a little difficult, but, try to work around that. Obviously, as for a journalist, you have to be adaptable and find other ways to tell a story sometimes. And so when I heard about Quranic schools, I thought, this is something that hasn't changed for hundreds of years. And so this might have been something that Omar would have done. He might have been very much sitting on a mat, writing out verses, when he was a child. So I just immediately connected, with the small group of students just writing out verses. And, it's kind of funny because obviously, it's two American journalists coming to this very hundreds of year old village, in Senegal. And, obviously we stood out, but, it's kind of all about patience. You can't rush some things. And that's really important with, these longer form stories. You can't force it. You can't, get, quick photos or, quick results. It's really about patience and taking your time and being willing to accept, what comes along. And so I was just, kind of hanging out and just kind of looking, for what were to happen. And this was kind of something that stood out. He was just joking around with his classmates, and I just, took this photo, and it's something that's kind of stood out to me from my time there. And then next photo. And so this is on Gori Island, which is an island right off of the capital of Senegal, Dakar. And this was actually one of the last places we went to during our time there, because this is I think one of the last House of Slaves, remnants of the House of Slaves on Gori. And so we thought it would be great to essentially try and find out who Omar was before we went here, because this place was essentially the last stop before enslaved people were taken to anywhere across the globe. And so we, researched Omar and met, a myriad of people, and then coming here and hearing kind of the horrors and tragedies that people had to go through before then leaving and coming to places like Charleston, and then experiencing that again through slavery. It really kind of puts a perspective what Omar, the person that we were writing a story about, went through, and kind of more about his identity. And so this was just a moment there, and this is kind of like another one of those tricky situations. Photography and videoing on Gori Island is restricted. You have to pay a fee to record, and we weren't going to do that. It's kind of expensive. And so for most of the time on that island, I didn't take photos or record. I was just listening until we got to the House of Slaves, and we had a guide showing us who kind of said like, okay, I think you're okay to take photos here. And so this was just a moment I saw of one of the curators walking around just the building, and it kind of just shows the weirdness, or not the weirdness, but like the juxtaposition of this beautiful red designed structure, and then in like the rooms and halls, kind of like the tragedies that took place in the past. And then this was another stop along our way when we were in Senegal. This was we were asking people like for where we should go and if they had any suggestions on where who we should interview. And someone suggested this village called Gababe. And so we went there, and someone in our group had a family member who knew I think the imam. And so we went and met with the imam, and he was just we were asking him questions about like, oh, does Omar's story sound familiar? And all these other questions around Omar's life. And he's like, oh, I think you're in the wrong place, but I do know an Omar. And it's like, oh, you do? And he's like, yeah. And he comes out with this painting, and it's like, this is my dad. He was also named Omar. And we're like, it's just, kind of one of those parts of the story that kind of tell it in a different way. It's not exactly literal to the narrative of Omar, but kind of shows you a little bit about the community and the people there, and the varieties. And so I asked if I could get a portrait, and I asked like, hey, could you hold it in front of you? And it kind of like, this isn't Omar, but this is, someone from that region, of that history, of that past.
That's a good example of, we had a question about, do we set things up for photographs or pose things? And, not to say that we don't, but our, most of what we do, we try to be, what we try to do as storytellers is to document um, people, try to be a fly on the wall. And that's not to say, obviously, this, you said it was a portrait. And so this is an example of when we would kind of create an arrangement, if you will, to help with that storytelling.
Yeah. And this is in Cope, and this is one of the places where we stopped at where we think actually might have been Omar's home. The group that we went along with are still continuing to do research on Omar and returned after we left. But this was after we sat down essentially with the whole community there. The village has been there, I think, for more than 400 years. And so we just sat down and like we did anytime we were, asking them questions. And it's kind of like going back to the patients and, talking to people and listening. And kind of sometimes you need to explain why you're there, because sometimes people are, they question your motives and they want to know what exactly are you there for. And so a lot of times we'd sit down at these places and we would go through introduction about what we were doing there, what our purpose was, what we hoped to get out of it. It was difficult because I don't, the language there is Pular. I don't speak Pular or French, which is the majority of the people speak there too. So we had to go through quite a few translators to kind of ultimately, have a conversation, and it took a while. I mean, we'd be there for 3 to 4 hours talking, and so this is kind of after that. I asked, is the Senegal River nearby? And said, yeah, it's just right down there, and it was just these two guys just working on a boat, and one of the elders walked by to take a look, and it's one of the things that kind of connects with Omar. He might have, left, taking his last steps on Senegal on a boat like this, possibly. So it's just another way to, connect it to the story.
Well, I think we've got a little time if you guys want to talk about some of the questions. Are you guys up for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So people are often curious about what gear we use. And if you guys want to just talk briefly, maybe kind of what your approach is on gear. We don't think about gear probably as much as people think that we do. But Gavin, what about you? You have a go-to lens that you gravitate more than the other, or you have a strategy on it?
Usually I like so I guess I shoot with a wide lens for if I need to get close in a certain situation. And then if I'm unable to get close, or, I would like to create a greater depth of field, I might use my telephoto. Mm-hmm. But I think a particular lens I like to use, at least for video, is a 90 millimeter. Mm-hmm. It creates this look that's a little bit more different.
Mm-hmm. It kind of has that compressed.
Yeah,
it kind of flattens out a little bit and has a soft out of focus.
It creates more fall of a look, at least to me. And so that's something, at least for video, I gravitate more to use is the 90 millimeter.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, typically, I'll have two camera bodies with me, with one that's a wider, one with a longer. Honestly, my go-to lens is whatever one I have. I mean, I think you can make it pretty much anything work. There was always a trick I used to do in college, is you try to photograph for a week on one particular, focal, length, mm-hmm. and kind of just get used to every single, length from, 24 millimeters to 200. But primes are my favorite. A 50 or a 35 are definitely my go-to if I could only pick one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that people know, kind of I guess our main lenses are I guess are the two zooms, right? The ultra wide, like the 15, or there's a 15 and 16 to 35s. Then we have the 70 to 200 zooms, and for a project work where that's probably one of those opportunities where if you have a prime, you have the flexibility to work that a little more. The zooms are great to have, but you do get a very different look with a prime lens.
And a prime lens is for those that they're a fixed focal length. So like when I say a 35 prime, it doesn't zoom at all. Your feet are your zoom. So that's kind of makes it a little bit, more fun in a way. But yeah, primes are stuck on one, millimeter.
Yeah, and they tend to have a wider aperture, so you can get a shallower depth of field. You don't have to, but it does allow you to do that. So that also helps differentiate the look. Let's see, let's go back to the questions here. How about Gavin? What's the toughest moment you've had in your career?
Let's see. It's the toughest moment. Leaving Senegal. But I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Toughest. I mean, sometimes with stories that Andy showed emotionally, it can be very tough. And then sometimes it could be physically tough, and sometimes that's that's something to worry about. I remember, I think it was the Emancipation Day parade this past year on January 1st, and you don't really notice sometimes you're carrying two lenses, but when you're walking 2 miles in the sun, it kind of,
that's a very, very physical job.
Yeah, and so I think that's a kind of a tough thing. At least as we get older, start to feel it a little bit more. But I guess, yeah, I think that's the first thing that kind of comes to mind right now. I mean, there's a lot of stories, but
Sure. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, I guess I would say one of them, at least that comes to mind right away, because we just talked about it, but was was Jenny Lawson losing her wife. I mean, there's been several stories that we've worked on that are just tough, but it never gets easier. It just kind of, it's a challenge. I mean, there are a lot of times where you kind of just have to put down the camera, because I mean, in the end, we're humans first, and I think that's what's most important.
Yeah, and then these people, they're part of our community, and we respect that. And in a lot of stories, even though we're there covering that as objective journalists, it's not that we don't have feelings, but we have to handle those and do the work that that we're ethically dedicated to do. Well, I think we're probably getting to the end here. I appreciate Gavin and Andy joining us. So I really enjoy working with these guys.
And I want to include, if you did like what we talked about here, they just posted about Focal Point, our newsletter.
Yeah.
Basically, it's the idea of that was beyond the stories that we tell. And, so like when we do work on these longer form stories, we talk about what are the hardships we have to go through, what are those moments that we capture. And it's a real nice Q&A between myself and some of the other photographers on our staff when we're able to work on these stories. And so, sometimes, it's less hard hitting, and we'll talk about like, I don't know, shutter speed and stuff like that. But it's a really fun newsletter, and you get to see really good photography that you wouldn't necessarily see, on every day. But definitely, I think we posted it down there. It's Focal Point. It comes out Fridays at noon.
Yeah. You can, and if you have ideas, you can share those with us. And like Andy said, you can check out our Focal Point newsletter, you can visit postandcourier.com/newsletter-sign up. That'll be posted in the Q&A, I think. And you can check out our other newsletters down there as well.
And
But
please reach
again,
out. Please reach
pardon?
out to any of us.
Yeah,
Anything. Our emails are in there, but definitely love the chat, photography wise, story wise. If you want to know more in depth about the story, I love talking about this stuff. And you know, the more we educate about what we do, the better people understand. I think that's very important. And but yeah, I appreciate everybody that tuned in today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for everybody who watched today, and those of you who are watching this later. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.